Alright, both players are readied up and should be going started pretty soon.
Okay, so our runners have started off, and we see No Life is about to enter the climb room. There's a sorry, one of my streams is more behind than the other, but No Life almost makes the climb, but he misses the second to last jump. And Fozzy has successful climb, so he's gonna be a little bit ahead of No Life here at the moment.
Alright guys, so welcome to the Metroid Fusion tournaments. We do have nolife9face versus NOUFozzy. No Life has been at it quite a while, and NOUFozzy's somewhat new.
So, as I was saying, at the very start of the run, you saw the runners start a series of wall jumps in a very large room, which is the climb. That's the first really difficult section of the game, where it requires fairly precise wall jumps, and it's not uncommon to see runners fail that. Fozzy actually succeeded at getting it, while No Life missed the last wall jump, or the second to last wall jump, I should say. So that put Fozzy just a little bit ahead, as we can see here.
Yep, so a lot of the start of this game, first 20-30 minutes, we're going to see a lot of text on it, and it's unavoidable for now, until we learn how to break this game. So the basic thing we'll be trying to do is keep our jumps fairly tight, minimize as much backtracking movement as we can, and then stay on the ground as much as we can. Since Samus moves a lot faster just running around, and then she goes about half the speed while she's in the air. And then, in most Metroid games, the first item that you normally see, the first upgrade that you see, is normally Morph Ball. Metroid Fusion tries to change up just a little bit and give you missiles first, and make you actually fight a boss in order to get your Morph Balls.
Yeah, missiles actually have a lot of utility early on when your beam is significantly weaker, because you struggle to kill most enemies, whereas your missile will basically one-shot everything. So missile ammo management is extremely important in the early parts of the run. And I believe throughout this, No Life has gotten a little bit ahead of Fozzy, but not that much.
Yeah, they're about 2 seconds apart. Maybe 3. So this should be a fairly exciting match. Let's see where they're seated, how they're seated against each other. Only 3 spots apart. Then I don't know what their current PBs are at the same at this time, but I'm pretty sure they're both low to mid 50.
Yeah, I can actually check up on that real quick. I think I know it, but I'm gonna verify.
Yeah.
I don't want to give you guys a number and then find out I'm wrong.
Yep, so Metroid Fusion doesn't really have much in terms of any routing or anything. Basically, the only real decisions you have are what missile packs you grab, how many missile packs you grab, and how many E-tanks you grab. And then that's basically the extent to what we can do. So they're coming up on the I door, the biggest source of RNG in this run. We're going to see 8 doors, and then on the first 2, you had to get 3 shots in order to destroy that. So we effectively have 12 doors to deal with, and then they can either open up and you can shoot their eye immediately, or they're going to open up and have a beam ready to shoot you. Every time they shoot a beam, that's 2 or 3 seconds lost. 2 to 3 seconds. The timer is on an RNG as well, between how fast they open. So until we get charge beam, it takes 3 missiles.
And so the boss they just killed is Arachnus, and Arachnus is fairly straightforward. You basically want to unload as many missiles into him as you can. However, he occasionally will do a roll attack, which is RNG, and if he does that attack, you basically wasted a few missiles. Thankfully, it seems like they didn't get much in the way of rolls, although Fozzy did have one at the start, but both runners were able to clear the fight pretty easily. Another thing you would have seen them doing as well is that at the end of each boss fight, or most boss fights I should say, the boss will transform into a Core X mode, which is the little, I guess you could say, red circle flying around the room at the end of the boss fight that they were attacking. For that fight, you want to, in order to speed up the Core X sections of the fight, you have to do what is called doubles on the Core X. Basically, you try to hit the Core X with 2 missiles in the same frame. Well, normally, once you hit them with a missile, they enter invincibility frames, and you have to wait a bit before you can hit them again. If you manage to hit them with 2 in the same frame, all of that damage is taken, and that allows you to speed up the fight significantly. And you'll see that used on all of the Core X's, although certain conditions and aspects of the Core X can make it extremely difficult up to impossible to actually pull it off on. You'll actually see an example of one of the more difficult ones at the end of the Sector 1, which is where they're going to now.
Say hi, Sax.
And I also verified this just to make sure. No Life has a 50 as his PB, while Fozzy has a 52. So they are extremely close to each other with their personal best. We probably won't see a gap show up until the second half of the game. At least a significant gap.
And then that gap, it can be RNG alone. Just from my beams.
Yeah, so even then, it's fairly feasible that they could end up with being in sync for the whole run almost. RNG can easily lose you up to a minute if it's bad. So for the first section of this run, throughout Sector 1, as I mentioned before, you'll notice that runners tend to use a lot of missiles. As said, this is because your beam struggles to kill any enemies. In fact, those pirates are basically immune to your beam shots. So the easiest and most efficient way to kill them, obviously, is use your missiles. However, this introduces somewhat of a problem. The way drops work in this game is that, obviously, as you have full health, you only get missile drops. If you have full missiles, you only get health drops. So that adds a little bit of extra difficulty here. You need your missiles in order to kill each of the 4 well, I should say 3 of the stabilizers, but you also need them to kill enemies. So it's very easy to run out of missiles. Well, pretty much the only way to make sure you have enough is to keep getting missile drops. And the easiest way to do that is to not take any damage, which is a lot more difficult than it sounds. As a result, a lot of times you'll see runners struggle to actually keep their missiles throughout the entire area and keep enough of them. already we can see Fozzy. He's entering the room right before the I-beam door, and if he doesn't get a single missile drop from any of these pirates, he's actually going to be in a lot of trouble. And it looks like he's going to be in trouble anyway, because, well, no, he'll get a drop from the... Okay, so Fozzy needs 3 missiles to kill the eye door, and here he gets a little bit lucky because there's an enemy on this wall that you can easily kill, and he gets all the missiles he needs. But if he had 1 less missile, he would be in very serious trouble coming up to this eye door. And you have to go somewhere to farm for missiles.
Which fortunately is pretty close. That door underneath the eye door has hornos that infinitely spawn. And then since he had full energy, every kill was guaranteed missile drops.
And as we JC, I guess you can explain this. Talk about doubles on the I-beam core for a little bit.
Okay, so on these first 2 doors, we have to get 3 missiles in, and then have to wait between everyone. With the addition, with us grabbing the charge beam right here, we're now with it being 2 parts and a flare and some flare damage that comes right over a cannon. We're able to finish off the eye doors in 1 shot now. There is a trick for needing only essentially 2 shots or 2 rounds on the eye doors on the first 2, and it takes into account a little bit of not necessarily hitbox abuse, but whenever Samus is in the spin, the frame that you fire while she's spinning determines where her shot comes out of. So for an eye door double or horizontal double, if you do that in other places, if you jump, do a spin, and then immediately fire, a missile is going to come out from behind Samus, and then you have a little bit of time to shoot a second missile, so it comes in and connects at the same time as the first missile. So we're probably not going to see that any chances for that for the rest of this run now. But for I-cores, every time you damage them with a missile, they're going to have an invincibility period. But if you're able to get 2 missiles in at the same time, and then for the non-beam Korexes, you can lure the Korex to run into 2 missiles at the same time. You just have to kind of lead them into it. Since after the initial movement, the Korex is just going to start following Samus around, and every time he needs to turn it around, it's going to make a huge arc. So that's what you can do for most of that. And then on the beam Korexes, they have a much narrower hitbox. You can only hit them when they have that eye open and in that little area right there. So what we try to do is we try to get high, depending on the missiles that we have. We try to get above it, and then we jump up, and then aim down, shoot 1 missile. Then as we land again, we shoot another missile down. And then I'll talk more about the missile upgrades as we get to them and what that means for doubles later on.
Yeah, it cannot be understated how often you'll see runners find some way to hit an enemy with 2 missiles in the same frame. That is used incredibly often in this run, and as we've already talked about, you can use it to kill the last phase of bosses quicker and to get through eye doors quicker. So you will definitely see that a lot. Enemies in this game love their invincibility frames, and so we have to look for ways to do more damage. So obviously being able to hit them with 2 different attacks at the same time is the obvious choice there. So.
And another thing is the reason why we can only go for doubles, we can't go for triples or anything like that. While there could be potential setups for that, the game only allows you to have 2 missiles on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, so if you wait for one of them to hit, well, it's too late. You've already used up your... It's already going to be entering its invincibility frames, so... The invincibility frames are instant, so you can't just wait until there's not, like, it doesn't give you a single frame of time after you've shot them with a missile. So unfortunately, we're extremely limited in what we can do there.
Yep, and the only exception to the same frame is those eye door doubles that we mentioned earlier. You do get a 1 frame difference. You can have 1 frame difference, but your cooldown is too long for the missiles for it to turn into anything useful.
So obviously we've, as I kind of talked about, we already sort of see somewhat of a gap with No Life, who has actually gotten ahead of Fozzy by this point. And No Life is now going to be getting the bomb upgrade. Bombs are fairly limited in their utility in Fusion compared to the other games. In, I believe, all the other 2D Metroids, actually, you're capable of infinite bomb jumping, but in Fusion, that's not an option. So, or at least not a human doable option, I guess I could say. There's some bomb abuse you can do if you're a task, but even then, it's kind of...
Yeah, there's two reasons why you can't do an infinite bomb jump in Fusion. One is definitely that longer delay, and the other reason is Samus has to have 0 velocity while in the air for it to propel her. So typically you can only get a bomb jump while on the ground. And then you're not going to see any instances where any runners try to do a bomb jump in the air, trying to land at the perfect, get at 0 velocity at the right time. Since there's really no use for it in any percent. You do see one instance of it in 100% though.
Yeah, and that's actually because of the, if I remember correctly, that's because in that area you can't actually, the 100% use of it is because you can't actually grab ledges while a power bomb is going off, if I remember correctly. Yep. So you have to actually do a bomb jump. So now all of our runners will be heading over to the Zosby boss, which is the second traditional boss that we see. And Zosby is a bit interesting, primarily because the core of the fight is complete RNG. And the way Zosby works, sort of explain before we get in there, is that he will jump up a random number of times, and then he will, and then on one jump, he will just stay up in the air and come down on you extremely slowly. When that happens, you'll want to aim up at him and shoot in a charge shot and a few missiles. I believe optimally one charge shot can technically do the damage you need, but generally runners will fire 1 or 2 missiles to make sure that the full charge shot hit. Because if the full shot didn't hit, well, you didn't do enough damage, so you're in trouble.
Yeah, you have to do 20 damage each cycle.
And as you can sort of see what happened with No Life, if you if you don't move out of the way when he's coming down on you, he will clamp on you and you'll have to bomb your way out and he'll start sucking away your health. So each of the runners will want to do this as quick as possible. And as I said before, the number of useless jumps he has is pretty much random, although I believe every round is like a minimum number that he can give you.
Yep. The first round has a minimum of 0. Then after you destroy the first segment, then it's going to be 1 minimum jump, and then after you destroy the second segment, it's going to be a minimum of 2. After you destroy 3 segments, it's going to open every single time it jumps. And then on the final open, you have to get a charge beam and then 1 or 2 more missiles after that. So generally, you're going to see runners shoot 3 missiles up there. Just to make sure you don't have to wait again.
Yeah, and as we sort of saw, at the start of the fight, we saw Fozzy actually double. Generally, if you want to do a double, the easiest strats early game are to wall jump off a wall and shoot up 2 missiles right next to each other after you've landed and you start jumping. You usually wall jump off the wall, land, and try and fire 2 missiles upwards as you're jumping up. And the Core X, if you manipulate its behavior properly, it'll actually run into them. But what you saw Fozzy do in that fight was as the Core X is spawning, it basically doesn't exist, I guess you could say, until it's fully spawned. So Fozzy was able to shoot 2 missiles into it as it spawned. And its hitbox activated as soon as once it's fully spawned, and both of the missiles were in it, so it took the damage from both. So generally, you'll see runners actually hit that double, the first double, a lot more often than you might see them hit like the later doubles, because it's a little bit easier to do since you're just timing it to whenever it actually fully spawns in.
Yeah, but then that's what you're going to see on the first 3 non-beam core X's. The next one is going to be the last one that you see. Be fairly easy to get that initial double in.
Yeah, so we'll explain once we get there, but the missiles kind of the missile upgrades have a negative impact on your ability to get doubles, and again, we'll talk about that whenever they get the super missile upgrade. So now all of our runners will be heading to Sector 4, and Sector 4 is the aquatic sector. It's pretty much mostly water, and has all the water-based enemies as you've seen in all the other Metroid games. But there's a bit of a unique factor to this water. The water is electrocuted, so you're not supposed to actually get inside the water, because as you do, you take damage from it due to being electrocuted. But we're speedrunners and we want to go fast, so the question is it actually slower to avoid the water? And in a lot of cases, yes. So one of the things you'll see the runners do is that in order to go faster through a room, a lot of times they will intentionally go into the electrocuted water. And since it doesn't do that much damage, it's not too risky to do. And it's faster in a lot of areas. So,
yeah, it's like the only risk you have to be worried about as far as electricity goes is if you actually hit the wires themselves. Those do massive damage to you.
Yeah, the electrified wire doesn't do too much, but the wires do, and you'll you might see that. You might see how much damage they do at the end of this sector if they don't get a certain trick.
Well, you could also see it on the first instance of the electrocuted water if they accidentally roll off and miss the spring ball.
Yeah, true.
Or rather, a second instance. They could fall down the ladder too, I guess, but that happens sometimes.
As you can sort of see, No Life just crossed through the water as well in order to get to the other side a little bit quicker instead of actually holding onto that ladder. You notice there are little ladders and stuff on the ceiling, and those are extremely slow. So if you can avoid going across one, it's generally safer. And you can again see No Life. He does a little bit of a wall jump to avoid having to actually use the ladder. Unfortunately, in that area where he's at now, there's crumble blocks below you, so you cannot really avoid using the ladder unless you want to do some frame-perfect jumps. So, JC, you want to explain Ceres? I think that would be, since No Life's about to fight him.
Ceres is a jerk.
That's a great start.
Okay, so what Ceres does, when you see him start, it's no surprise what ability you can get from Ceres when you're done, which is Speed Booster. So when you start the fight, Ceres is going to be air boosting rather, throughout the arena, and then fortunately, he always does the exact same thing when you start the fight. And then after that, what he does is completely random. There are 3 different things that Ceres can do. He can go straight across. He can weave through between every single platform, or he can do a little arc that goes from one hole to a hole 2 holes over. So. And then if you see Ceres do a weave pattern or go straight across, you can't predict. You will know exactly what he's going to be next. But every time you see an arc, then what happens after an arc is always random. So every time you see that weave, he's going to be doing a big, huge arc that goes across the entire room. And then every time you see a straight across, he's going to do one of the smaller arcs. But you know exactly what he's going to be coming from when he does it. And then both runners handle that fight pretty well. And then what we were talking about earlier about the charge beam with having 2 parts and a flare. Each part there's a top part and a bottom part. It doesn't look like it unless you hit a wall or something. Then you can see it actually split into 2 different parts. But if you each part, when you're charged up, does 10 damage, and then the flare that you can see coming out of Samus's cannon does 6. Ceres has 50 HP, So if you get up into Ceres's face and then get 2 clean shots that have both parts in the flare, you can effectively do a 2-shot Ceres.
And both of our runners got the 2-shot Ceres, so thankfully that actually went extremely well for them. And here, we're actually about to see Fozzy attempt a trick that you've already actually seen called Low Height. Unfortunately, Spark ran out. But effectively, you want to do a Shine Spark right next to the ground. And whenever you do this, it allows you to basically spark across the ground, flat on, almost as if you're like flat on it. And this allows you to, for one, it allows you to basically go through some speed booster blocks that normally the game would expect you to just run and build up a speed booster manually instead of using a spark that you had from when you entered the room. And in other cases, it just speeds up it just speeds up certain areas. You actually saw them do one right after Ceres, but the one they did after Ceres is extremely easy because if there's a ceiling above you, it's like if there's like 2 blocks between you and a ceiling, if there's a ceiling with 2 blocks below it, you can actually basically just spam A underneath it until Samus starts to actually spark and then pick your direction. But if there isn't a ceiling there, you kind of have to just time it to right before you hit the ground.
Hello.
Welcome, Ross.
Sorry I'm late.
I'll forgive you this time.
So we have Rasu, who has joined us, commentary. He is top runner in the game. He also has a 46, which is 1 minute off the world record. He is probably going to beat Eagle in his eventual race whenever that happens.
I'm liking the sound of that.
And then he's going to get a 45, and we're not going to accept it.
Okay, so each of our runners has now entered Sector 3, which is a fairly straightforward sector. At the start, they're going to try and do a Shine Spark trick, which unfortunately No Life has already failed. But you're basically going to see them spark across and get into the security room. If they get the trick, you basically have a frame when you land on crumble blocks, you can actually store a Shine Spark. And assuming Fozzy gets this, they ideally want to fall to the bottom of the area after getting the Shine Spark. And Fozzy's gonna, unfortunately he missed it, he attempted to pause buffer it. But if they had landed it, they would have gotten to the bottom there and basically Shine Sparked across instead of waiting to charge one. And it would expose that area and they would shoot up, of course, to open it up and go and get the security room.
And that trick is actually frame perfect when you land, not necessarily with anything to do with any crumble blocks.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's right. It doesn't have to. Yeah, I messed up there.
Yep.
It's anytime you are jumping from a spark, you have like a frame that you can actually land and store it.
And then I don't believe it works if you're doing a spin jump, though.
Yeah, I think that does mess it up because you're not supposed to spin jump there either. So we actually saw No Life a while back store a spark, and he actually used it to on a crumble block, and he actually used it to Shine Spark up the shaft that we see Fozzy climbing up now. And you will see that at least one more time, where they will sort of do a little bit of a setup to get a Shine Spark after or right before they break blocks, and then use it to Shine Spark up a shaft that you normally would not have access to a spark with.
Yep, and then I'm not sure if either of the two runs saw the latest setup that's about a year old now. It's not as well known in. It's like, so if you're running from one side and trying to break it like on the first and store something on the first speed booster block as you break it, it's a 2-frame window. Later on, you're going to see one that there's a setup for one that gives you 4 to 7 frames to store it if you try to store it after the speed booster blocks.
So wait, the animal setup is like actually a year old now?
Pretty close.
Okay, that setup feels like it was so recent though.
I'll look up out. I'll look up
So
when
the
I posted the video for it.
so the fight we just saw that Fozzy did, and we've already seen No Life go through, was a fairly short fight. It was the boss of the sector called Box. For the box fight, you want to open it up by either shooting 2 super missiles into it whenever he jumps up, whenever he tries to jump at you, or a charge beam and a super missile. Either way, you want to basically hit him twice. The reasoning for that is because when Box starts out the fight, he tries to walk left a certain distance, and then he will sort of stop and start heading back right. And occasionally he'll do a jump, and whenever he tries to get beneath you, or like close to being beneath you, he'll stop and he'll use his little attack. Anytime he's not doing that, you basically want to be hitting him with as many missiles as possible. The runners also will want to manipulate his movement so he stays on the right side of the screen, and the reasoning for that is whenever he dies, he walks all the way to the right side of the screen and jumps up, and that ends the fight. And so obviously, if he's on the left side of the screen, that's a pretty long walk, so that loses a lot of time. So, as you saw in the fight, our runners tried to keep him in the same general area because they didn't want him to be very far on the left side of the screen before they killed him.
And then that reminds me of something that we didn't talk about earlier with the Core X's. So when you kill a Core X, there's a certain spot that the ability floats to after you destroy the X. Our goal at the end of on the last missile that we kill it with is to have it to kill it right on that spot, so it can be grabbed instantly. We call that the sweet spot. And then if you're off on it by a bit, you can it'll just kind of hover in place for a few seconds before you're able to grab it. And then if you have the right Y pixel or correct X pixel or like a perfect diagonal, it'll still snap into place when it gets there. But any other thing that's off that little line, off those little axes, then you're just gonna have to wait for it to be obtainable.
Yeah, so sweet spot, if you ever see the X where it seems like at the end of the fight where they keep jumping on it and it's just not letting them grab it, that just means you miss the sweet spot off by a little bit. And as JC explained, like if you're off like certain coordinate lines, it's just gonna float around for a while longer than normal. So if you notice, all of our runners are now in Sector 6, and Sector 6 is a fairly straightforward sector. Well, actually, stop for a second and explain sack skip, since No Life is actually about to do that. So, No Life is about to do what we call sack skip. Anytime you see a sax encounter, you can shorten it by usually doing a trick that's pretty much always called sack skip. We generally just call like Sector 6 sack skip and so on. Sack skip is basically triggering sacks in order to escape the room faster. The reasoning for this is that whenever Sax enters a room, you basically have to wait for him to leave and do his stuff before you can actually exit safely. So it's obviously a little bit faster if you can just get Sax to go a different direction and dodge him and get out of the room quicker. Because generally, when you leave like a room or the next 2 rooms or so, Sax will be gone.
Okay, so a major plot point in this game was, so for those that haven't played this game before, before the events of the game, Samus goes back to same planet where as Metroid 2, where she killed all the Metroids. I forget the actual numbers.
SR388.
388. She goes back there for another deal, and then she kills her Hornode, and then the next parasite infects her and starts to really mess her up. And then doctors decide, hey, let's use a Metroid and make a vaccine out of it. So, for everyone that's familiar with the Metroid series, Metroids are vulnerable to cold. So those blue X have an ice property on them that does a lot of damage to Samus until she grabs the various suit that NOUFozzy has just grabbed. So, there's that.
Yeah, another property is that Sax has Ice Beam, so before you get the various suit upgrade, it will be able to freeze you, and that makes it a lot harder to get away, so you got to be able to dodge its beam. So anyway, the fight that we just kind of saw both No Life and Fozzy kind of get through really quickly is the Megacorex fight. Megacorex is fairly straightforward. You want to basically, you can kill him in 4 shots using similar tactics as you did with Ceres, where you want to kill him with both parts of the charge beam and the flare. And the way at the start of the fight, he starts in the top left-hand corner, and so what you want to do generally is that you want to neutral jump up there and damage boost through his little micro mega cores that protect him, and hit the core with a fully charge shot with both parts of it and the flare. And if you do this properly, you'll do it in 4 shots. And you can actually, if you're fast enough and you do it correctly, he will keep coming from that top left corner, so you don't need to worry about him going anywhere else in the room. But if you mess up your positioning slightly, he will start to go to other areas in the room, and it becomes a lot slower fight.
Typically not too bad though.
Yeah, and another thing mentioned too is we saw that I mentioned we were going to talk about. Whenever you get a missile upgrade in this game, it generally slows down your missile and it increases the cooldown timer. This is why getting doubles of missiles becomes a lot harder, because you need to time them better, because your missiles, there's more cooldown in between each missile shot, and with them being slower, it forces you to be way more precise with your missiles. And I just saw Fozzy, I believe, actually got like 1 or 2 doubles in the Core X, so he was still able to get them fairly easily. But as I said, this happens with like every missile upgrade almost. So each and every single time you see them get a missile upgrade, it will make the fights that much harder to get doubles on.
It makes the initial shoot faster, but the cooldown is longer. Just to correct you on that one.
Okay, yeah.
But so generally what you want to try to do to account for that is you just want to lure the Core X higher, and that helps out a whole lot.
Yeah, you generally, the more space you have, the easier it gets to do it. So you want to have as much space as possible. And Rosh, you want to explain Sector 5?
Sure. What's there to talk about for Sector 5? Let's see.
It's boring. No bosses.
First of all, it's
Confusing.
the one and only sector that you visit 3 times in the game, so if you're not paying attention to your run, you could very easily be lost or forget about what you're trying to do or what the goal is. Right now, initially, for Sector 5, first visit there's really not much going on. So the runners will have to unlock the security level 3 and then make their way to the data room where they can pick up the ice missiles. As far as RNG goes, there's really not much. There's a lot of different waiver movement patterns that you have to kind of deal with. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and then as far as RNG goes, like throughout for enemies, most enemies only have 2 patterns. As far as like their initial movement goes. And then the only exceptions to that are the bulls in Sector 6. The ones that shoot out the poisonous gas every time you hit them. So generally you only have to account for 3 main patterns in most rooms.
So right now, I'm kind of a little worried for No Life, considering he might be a little bit short on missiles for the upcoming segment, the Sector 3 emergency. Typically, you want to have, I think the count is 15 missiles.
16.
16 missiles entering Sector 3. He's way below that number, so he'll have to find a way to regenerate his health to max so that he can guarantee missile drops. That being said, this is definitely an opportunity for Fozzy to catch up, considering that he's at max missiles right now.
Yep, and then I hope No Life knows some of the 0% strats for emergency.
He's gonna have to rely on it if he continues to use up his missiles like this.
Yeah, you definitely do not want to go with less than 10 ever. Because it wastes a lot less time to do a morph when you normally don't want to, or go a long way around, or not necessarily a long way, but a slightly slower way around the room to save some missiles.
Yeah, and obviously we can already see that, like, looking at Fozzy versus Life in that regard, Fozzy has obviously been a bit more conscious about his missile use. Probably for that reason exactly. He's been using Charge Beam more. But I think No Life is kind of aware of that too now, because he's obviously using his Charge Beam a bit more. I think he would have been using his missiles if he had more of them here.
Yeah, and as a general rule of thumb, once you grab Charge Beam, you actually want to always have that charging no matter what, except for very specific instances.
Well, at this point, after picking up the ice missile upgrade, most enemies will now take 2 missiles because of the fact that the first missile is a freezing effect, which is primarily the reason why you want to start using Charge Beam at this point. So it looks like No Life may have realized that he's kind of in a bad position for missile and decide to pick up the missile expansion there, which is not a normally picked up expansion for any percent.
Oh.
It's definitely not one of the slowest ones he could have grabbed. It was probably one of the most convenient ones he could have grabbed, honestly.
It was the only one he could grab along the way. I mean, what he had two options at this point for a random backup missile pack, and then the other one requires using a few missiles and waiting for enemies to respawn.
Yeah, so he was a bit limited in what he could go for there. So it was probably his best choice.
Well, I take that back. There is a fairly fast one at the bottom of the shaft in emergency.
I'm trying to think what you're talking about.
As soon as you fall down the shaft with all the stretchies, go one room right, go up.
That's what... Yeah, I remembered it right as you were talking about it. Okay, so unfortunately, No Life made a little bit of a mistake, and he accidentally talked to Adam as you're entering the emergency.
He pulled
Normally,
an
each time you enter a sector, obviously, as we've seen, you talk to Adam, and he explains to you what you're supposed to do every time you enter and leave. And so, the only thing is, for the emergency sector, he tells you what you need to do as you're leaving Sector 3, but he doesn't actually remind you, or sorry, as you're leaving Sector 5, and he doesn't actually remind you of what to do when you enter Sector 3 this time. So if you've just been kind of instinctively talking to him at the start of every sector, because he usually does talk to you, you can sometimes make mistakes like that and accidentally waste a few RTA seconds.
So because of that, it looks like Fozzy is actually caught up significantly from picking up the extra missile tank and talking to Adam. Fozzy's able to chop down his 30-second... I'm sorry, he was behind 30 seconds, so it looks like he's going to be behind like maybe about 10 or 15 because of the 2 mistakes. Well, I wouldn't say the missile expansion is a mistake, but talking to Adam definitely is a mistake, and it's going to cost him here.
I would say No Life's mistake was being so low on his missile count. I think getting the missile expansion was sort of a symptom of that mistake.
Yeah.
Him losing up his missiles didn't actually directly cause him to lose time, but it led to forcing him to do something that caused him to lose time. And we can already see that they're only one room behind each other at the moment, and depending on how his outdoor RNG goes, which is really good for Fozzy there.
So now it looks like they're almost neck and neck.
Yeah, so he got a bit of help from some of No Life's mistakes as well as some RNG, and I'm not sure how familiar Fozzy will get any doubles. I don't think... Well, he can still get 1 double. Yeah, I think he thought he landed a double, but he did not.
Yeah, and then... So with super missiles and ice missiles taking a lot longer than normal missiles, what used to be the standard for doubles on I-cores was you only went for the charge beam one, since your missiles are you had a lot less cooldown. And then eventually new setups were found, so you can get them on the wide beam core X that we just finished, as well as plasma beam, and for the end of the sax fight at the end of the game. And then you just have to pretty much get yourself a lot higher. And then the key on getting them, when you have these missiles with the higher delay is you want to be at almost full falling speed before you fire your first one. That way, Samus has a chance to catch up to the missile.
Yeah, and those setups are primarily for the beam core X's, because the beam core X's, as you've already seen, they're only vulnerable in the eye, so you have to sort of mix it up in order to actually be able to actually land a hit on them. You'll still see similar setups that we've already seen regarding wall jumping and stuff for the non-beam core X's until the end of the game, honestly, until we get to Sack's fight, which is going to be a beam core.
So Fozzy was able to do the fast climb, whereas No Life opted for the slower climb, and now Fozzy is caught up even more. After the wide beam split, they were only 6 seconds apart, so it looks like they may be even less than that now.
Yeah, No Life definitely. Well, even though he didn't die, he lost a ton of time from ultimately, him not having enough missiles leaving Sector 5 just kind of added it up and made him lose a lot of time. And of course, his leaving Sector 5 strats were not as good as Fozzy's, so that cost him even more time.
Yeah, and then that little strategy coming, it does take a little bit of practice to kind of figure out what's going on for that. And then at first, when you're just watching somebody do it, it does look a little bit overwhelming just how they do it. But you can kind of do that room blindfolded once you know what's going on. Since like every other speed game, a lot of it's muscle memory more than anything else.
Yeah, Fusion is a bit notorious in GBA Metroid scene because of how the RNG can basically not cause you to lose a run, but it will commonly cause you to lose time. But a lot of the room layouts, for the most part, you don't really have to worry about RNG. There are plenty of rooms where it forces you to like alter the strat you do, but for the most part, navigating through the rooms is the same. So if you're a Super Metroid runner, you might want to turn away at this point. I'm sorry, but unfortunately, our runners are going to have to go and save the animals. And this segment is a bit unique. You're going to see, as we mentioned before, we talked about how there was a little bit of a setup to break a block with a shine charge and store it in order to get the spark where you normally wouldn't have it. And you're actually going to see our runners. I think we're probably going to see at least one of them go for this setup. I think one of them I think I saw Fozzy do it in one of his earlier races, but I might be wrong. I might be thinking of No Life, but yeah, I think No Life kind of knew the setup a little bit. Now he's just going to shine buffer it. So No Life, he did the okay. So Fozzy is doing the setup. If you stand on that block and you shine spark and you speed boost left properly, as you saw, he broke the block even though he was past it, which allowed him to get an easy shine store. What we saw No Life do was a different setup where you basically tried to do the little 2-frame trick that JC was talking about, where you store it as you break the block.
I think animals just tied them back up.
Wow. Fozzy had almost perfect animals, whereas No Life was slightly bad.
Yeah.
And now they are literally neck and neck. So this will be an interesting race to watch.
Yeah, animals are RNG, and as we saw there, it can really easily... I don't think any of them had extremely bad animals, but you can have animals that are extremely bad and can lose a lot of time. Mostly because generally, I believe it's the first and last enemies, or the first and last animals are actually like set in stone. So if they're based on where they are in the background, if you have unfortunate luck, it can kind of mess you up a little bit.
Actually, I think No
Life had lost 6 seconds to animals. Because he did have quite a bit of a lead going into the animals thing.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sorry. I didn't see his animals as well. I thought I was anticipating he was going to lose time because of the pause buffer, so I think I was giving that a bit more credit to his time loss.
I mean, yeah, you do lose a few seconds to pause buffering. And then, which only hurts your RTA time.
But that is especially relevant given that both of these guys are in racing, so...
Oh, yeah.
You want to be really conscious of what strats you're doing and the RTA impact they have. Which is not something Fusion runners generally think about, because in-game time is the primary comparison form. So if you're used to like pause buffering a lot of stuff, that can actually cost you if there are alternative setups that don't require pause buffering. Even though, sure, it saves in game time if you land it properly, if you're in a race with someone else, you got to worry about that real time you lost too.
Okay, so now we've entered Sector 5 for a second time, and for this instance, our objective is to get the power bomb upgrade. Once again, there's really not much going on for Sector 5, except for one really neat trick that they're going to attempt in a little bit here, shine sparking across the big room. Other than that, they're going straight for the data room since they've already had the security doors unlocked.
Yeah, and it looks like both of our runners got the shine spark, so that's good.
Yep, so the first few trips of Sector 5 are fairly boring. It's basically grab an item, get out. And then you notice in this big room that they're in, you see Nightmare Shadow kind of hovering around everywhere. You can kind of hear him float around. So it's kind of like a nice little reveal. It's like, okay, something scary is going to happen in this sector. Eventually.
So, much like most Metroids, after picking up an upgrade, the game really wants to show you how to use it. So in the upcoming room, the only way out would have to be using a power bomb.
And right here in this room, where both NOUFozzy are at, you do a little bit of a sack skip again, where you basically, ooh, Fozzy, that's not, okay, he made it out. But you basically do kind of another sack skip, but really, you're just letting the power bomb because it's faster to do that and morph jump into the little tunnel it opens up.
Yeah, so
you don't really have to wait on sacks, but it's faster to do the power bomb, so it ends up triggering sacks anyway.
Yep, and then you just saw on No Life's stream how a bunch of jerks blue X's can be. So while they don't damage teammates anymore, they can block shots meant for other enemies, and you just jump into the enemy instead.
Yeah, generally the X cores can just basically ignore your beam shots, but the game, obviously, when you entered Sector 6, you needed a way in order to keep the Ice X's off you till you got various suits. So they made it so that if you could shoot them and stun them. The only thing is they didn't take away that property once you got various suit, so they can still block your shots.
Yeah, but then another thing that we didn't really mention with the addition of various suit, it actually makes all the X counters a lot scarier. Because if you mess them up, it used to be before Varia, the ice beam would always freeze you before Sex had a chance to kill you. If your energy is low enough, you can just die to the ice beam now, without that extra layer protection.
Yeah, as it turns out, repeatedly getting shot with ice beam is a bit more effective at killing you than getting shot with ice beam and then waiting 5 seconds for the sacks to hit you with a super missile.
My guess is that Sax would want to finish you off in style.
Yeah, we'll just go with that. So, like you said, Fozzy and No Life are really close to each other at this point. We're seeing Fozzy leave a room as No Life's entering it, and this room is kind of a bit annoying. Okay, Fozzy, don't, or No Life, don't, okay. So, Fozzy just shot ahead because No Life struggled with Spitter Room. Spitter Room is probably one of the most hated rooms in this game because you basically want to charge up a speed booster and have it go through speed blocks at the end of the tunnel. But if you keep struggling to get the speed booster, you basically just have to go into the next room and lay down a power bomb to expose a different path.
Yeah, and then getting hit by the spitter is just complete RNG. And generally, it's a lot better just to power bomb the next room if you run out of room. It's generally a lot slower just to go back just to get speed booster again.
Yeah, and so that RNG just kind of allowed Fozzy to get ahead now. So, and also it was not helped by the power bomb mess up that we saw No Life do in the previous room.
Yeah, and then Some of the easiest time losses that are easily remedied for a lot of newer runners is you basically want to know exactly what tile you need to be on to get speed booster in time. Because there's a few places in the run where you have to run back a certain distance because you need to get speed booster, and then there's a lot of people that overcompensate and go like an extra 4 or 5 tiles, including to the end of the other side of the room, and then that just adds a lot of backtrack time within that room itself. So just knowing at what point you need to be in order to get the speed booster just helps out your time a whole lot. And then in that spitter room, knowing how far you need to be to get speed booster in time for the next room will be a good indicator on whether or not it's worth it to go back and try to get speed booster. Because you're still fairly close, like one or two tiles away from that point you need to be. It'd probably be a little bit better just to try to go for speed booster at that point again.
Yeah, so this is Yakuza, which is one of the more annoying bosses. And ooh, Fozzy, that luck. Okay,
Yep.
but
Yep, he's annoying because he's a spider with 6 legs.
So the way this fight starts off, and we saw Fozzy actually got a bit lucky there. Whenever you open up the fight, you'll basically want to unload missiles into Yakuza at the start as he's climbing down from the top of the room. And you basically have to sort of use somewhat of a sound and I guess motion clue in order to time it properly. But if you do it correctly, you'll be able to unload enough damage to him where you only need 1 round of his next phase. His next phase is he will go climbing around the room and try to grab you off the ground up to 4 times. But if you're lucky and RNG is your favor, he will only do it once. Otherwise, you have to wait until he's done it enough times, and he opens his mouth for you to damage him again, which will take you to the second phase of the fight. In the second phase, Yakuza will basically be space jumping all around the room, and you need to hit him with optimally missiles. But we saw Fozzy, he went a little bit safe with it and just used Charge Beam, but that's a bit slower, even though I believe the fully charged Charge Beam at this point does do more damage. Because of the speed you can fire missiles, it's a little bit quicker to kill them with missiles, is at least what I had been popularly told.
Yeah, and then it's not really that much slower to do Charge Beam. It's a bit riskier because every time you miss one, you do have to wait an extra jump from Yakuza. It's like generally, it's like you have just enough time to do a shot, wait for Yakuza to come back, and your beam will be ready again. So since there is a bit of a delay period before you can damage Yakuza, Charge Beam isn't necessarily that much slower, even though I do find it a little bit harder than missiles anyway.
It seems
Let's see here, both of them are really close right now, like extremely close.
Right, I was going to say, it seems that Fozzy is actually ahead of his PB pace. So
Yeah.
Fozzy is really putting in some work to make sure that he maintains the lead that he has.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. No Life has a 50 as his PB, while Fozzy has a 52. So obviously, No Life's a bit behind on his splits.
That was a scary situation for No Life to be in. Those key hunters, if they hit you with a stinger, they do 127 damage, and getting trapped like that, one can just combo you pretty bad by itself and kill. Even though he has, is it 4 E tanks, 5 E tanks?
So I'm assuming that No Life just grabbed this determined he has like so many missiles, so he's just. So for the Netherite fight, which is the boss they're fighting at the moment, you want to use as many missiles as possible because missiles kill him quicker. But you'll basically use your Charge Beam and your power bombs until you've actually done enough damage to him where you can basically use as many missiles as you need to in order to finish him off.
Alright, so basically for Netherite, how many charge beams you want to shoot is basically you take 48 minus your max missile count, or if you accidentally miss the red X, 48 minus how many missiles you actually have, and then from there you'll be able to spam missiles, and then run it, and then finish off the main fight right as you run out of missiles. And then, since it is a beam core X, you do have to wait for a bit before you can actually damage it. So there's plenty of time for you to farm some green X while waiting.
Yeah, we actually saw that of course No Life had 50 missiles, so that's why he unloaded on him with just missiles pretty much, because he knew he had enough to kill him and still actually have some for the fight after. I said before, our runners are even closer now, so this could really, at least at this rate, this can go to anyone at this point.
Gentatsu, I don't remember what the first extra expansion No Life has grabbed. He ran into a situation in Sector 5 towards the end, getting ready to go to emergency, where he was running pretty short of missiles, so he needed a quick 5 so he can get through emergency reasonably well. And then, so I guess we'll just take some time to talk about optimal missile counts. I talked about how we had some choices in how many missile packs and how many E-tanks we grab. We need one E-tank and 35 missiles to do this run optimally. And then we need that one E-tank because there's a few bosses that we take intentional damage in order to complete them. So we saw in Sector 6 when they were fighting Mega Corax, where we had to take some damage off the little orbs on the side, little spikes on the side, so we can get close to, so we can actually get inside Mega Corax to do the damage. And then that does, when you do that strat, that does almost like 80 damage at that point to you total for an optimal fight. And then if you get hit by the wrong thing, it does more than that, so you definitely want an extra E-tank when you do that strat. And then we saw No Life opt to do the grab strats for Yakuza, so that is a bit of damage. And then for optimal Nightmare that we're about to run into, we are going to take at least 2 intentional hits. And then that does over an E-tank by itself worth of damage.
So it looks like Fozzy's lead has grown even more because he was able to do the Shine Spark across, 4 or 5 rooms?
Like 5 rooms.
Right. The first try, however, No Life was not so lucky and he had to set it up again.
Looks like the Idors are a bit generous, though. I believe both of them got 2 beams, so that's gonna...
Yep, and
so
then
at least neither of them lost time to RNG there.
Alright, so one last thing about the missile count. The reason that we try to do 35 or 40 missiles is solely because of Netori and for Nightmare. Most runners do, a lot of top runners do 40 missiles. Because after the 40th missile pack, you don't get the time save on Nightmare. You need you need 32 to 33 missiles to finish off Nightmare in order to start the core. And then after that, you just save a few seconds on that's actually NOUFozzy.
Okay, and neither of them are having very great Nightmare fights at the moment. Ooh, and Fozzy's low on missiles too, so that's not...
Come on, draw him down. There you go.
Seems like... Okay, Fozzy has the health to do it, but I would be a bit more careful with that X. Because he could very easily die.
Yeah, he'll be fine. He should be fine. Yeah, oftentimes you're going to see that the core after a boss tends to do quite a bit more damage than the boss itself. So, what you're going to see a whole lot in Fusion, what kind of makes it a bit difficult of a game to pick up casually into her speedrun is there is an abnormal damage done by an enemy per rank. As in, you're going to see a bunch of normal, regular enemies do a lot more damage than most of the bosses in this game. And then, so I guess we should have talked about Nightmare Fight a little bit more. So basically, you can get Nightmare through its first few phases, his normal start phase, and then the gravity phase that he has. Pretty fast. It takes 3 missiles and 4 shots and 4 charge shots to get into the third phase, where his mass explosion, you should start missiling it a lot. And then after he goes all the way to the far left wall, he goes into a random direction, and then he starts to chase Samus around. As long as you don't have Nightmare fly off the screen, you'll be able to manipulate him to stop. And you generally want him to be kind of high, but not too high. You want to be able to fire him from the ladder, which both the runners were not quite able to pull off very well. And sometimes it just depends on Nightmare's movement. Sometimes, like, it all is kind of based on that and how well you are at luring him around. But if he's too low, then you have very few options to be able to continue spamming missiles. But the reason that we like to take the intentional damage on that phase is it lets us get him within 6-7 missiles of dying. So even if he goes low, you can actually just jump from the floor and get a lot of missiles in. So both players are in probably the scariest section of the game, where all these enemies hit pretty hard, and a lot of them are in pretty close quarters. So there's a very real chance of getting comboed all over the place and get your health knocked down.
Yeah, but thankfully they're basically both done with this section at this point, so I actually managed to get through it fairly safely, although No Life struggled a bit more than Fozzy did, it looks like.
Yep, and then these little puffer fish, they can actually do quite a bit of damage to you. But as long as you go in there with close to a full E-tank, they can't kill you.
Yeah, so now Fozzy is getting our last missile upgrade, which is the diffusion missiles. Again, same rule as before, it speeds them up, but it also increases cooldown. And diffusion missiles, as you can sort of see, their property is whenever you basically charge it up, you can fire it without charging, and it basically functions like an ice missile almost. But the purpose of it is to charge it up and then fire it, and it causes a little bit of a ice missile shockwave that can destroy anything that's vulnerable to missiles, or freeze anything that's vulnerable to missiles within that area. That's important because there is at least one area in the late game, right before the boss, before Sack's fight, where there are basically 3 missile blocks in a row, and you can destroy all 3 of them using 1 diffusion missile shot. So pretty much anywhere where it's a bit difficult to hit missiles blocks that you need to hit, or if there's a ton of them sequentially, you'll want to use diffusion missiles to speed that up. So now all of our runners are entering Sector 6 for what I believe is the second time, and they're going to fight Xbox, which is the upgraded form of the box fight we saw earlier. And Xbox, its fight is very similar to the first fight, except his primary attack is different, and the room layout being different makes your evasive tactics slightly different as well. We'll see. I'll talk a bit more about that once we get into the fight. But at the moment, they're basically going to head and trigger the fight. And just like the box fight in Sector 3, Triggering it basically requires you to go to a specific room and a specific spot in that room in order to actually cause the boss to appear. You're actually going to see the runners go up to a wave beam gate where it will open up, where after hitting it will cause the boss to spawn, and then they won't be able to fight it. Which Fozzy is just right next to now. So, JC, you want to take the lead on explaining Xbox Fight?
Xbox is basically the same as box, except this time when you're hanging from the little rungs in the ceiling, box can jump and actually knock you off them, so you have to do a little bit of avoiding with that. Since you now are fully upgraded with your missiles, you can't really spam as many missiles into him. He takes 12 missiles to die on the first phase. And then it'll lead you to the Wave Beam Corex, which is the only beam Corex that cannot be done on console. And then the test had a lot of trouble getting that going as well. And it's simply because we simply have no room to do it.
Referring to the doubles.
Yeah, the
on the
doubles.
Corex. Not the actual Corex itself. It is very beatable as a human.
Nope. It's not beatable. I haven't seen her get past it before.
Shoutouts to dying in AGDQ.
Ooh. So as you can see, both of our runners are done with that fight, and now they're going to be heading to, as expected, the Federation, of course, is a secret Metroid breeding program. Since I'm pretty sure that has been like a thing like at least 2 or 3 times.
Kind of surprised that Wave Beam missed that button for the gate.
On Fozzy stream?
Yeah.
Or No Lives? Okay.
On
Yeah, I saw
Fozzy.
that in Fozzy stream. There was a weird bit of hitboxing there.
Yeah, it's like...
Oh, so there's a small little Easter egg. Well, I'm not really sure if it's an Easter egg, but in that room right before when the Metroids are attacking Sax, if you actually do a jump through the door, all the Metroids end up lined up like that. So it's a little neat little thing that you can see. Otherwise, you can see on No Life stream, they're kind of random positioning.
And random is awesome.
Again, this is one of the easiest escape sequences in Metroid history, probably. You just dodge the Metroids, because if you hit one of them, they bounce you back, but you just kind of dodge them and get to the top of the room and leave.
Yeah, and then all the time sections in Fusion are very lenient in their times. You saw an emergency, they gave you 6 minutes. They completed in less than 2. Or less than 3 of those. But you have plenty of time to spare. They give you 60 seconds for this thing. You get done with it in 10. And then the final escape, you still have quite a bit of time at the end. A lot of it just depends on how you handle the Omega fight.
Honestly, that one, the final one, is probably one of the less lenient ones, honestly. And it's still extremely lenient.
Oh yeah. It's so lenient that Task can grab 5 items, kill like 5 expansions. Or is it 6? I don't remember anymore. Quite a few. While escaping and still finishing time.
Yeah, so you're actually about to see, it's the room after the one Fozzy's in, you're going to see him use the fusion missiles to clear a series of blocks. And there were 3 missile blocks there, but it's faster to clear them all with the fusion. And he's not going that way at the moment, but he'll be going that way on his way out, and they stay safe, destroyed. And now Fozzy's going to be fighting what we call gold pirates. Gold pirates can only be damaged from a shot in the back, but the way the game checks for this is it checks which direction you're facing, it checks to see if you're both facing the same way, basically. And because of that, you can shoot a charge shot at it, turn away before the shot hits, and it'll damage it. And Ross, you can explain Ridley?
Sure. First of all, Ridley makes really loud noises.
It's Eagle's favorite noise.
Basically, Ridley is a giant hitbox that you want to put your wave beam through diagonally so that you can have as much damage possible. The way that wave beam works is that every time the wave beam is inside an enemy's hitbox, it does damage per frame, which is considerably more than just spamming missiles. So the primary strategy for this fight is to make sure that you're aiming your wave beam right across Ridley's hitbox diagonally. And as you know, with math and geometry, 1 point from one end to the other diagonally is a little bit further than it is straight across, either vertically or horizontally. So by doing this, you're able to do, I think, one charged wave beam does equivalent of maybe 10 or 11 missiles, which is a lot faster.
Yep, and then the only exception there is to making sure you do nothing but diagonal shots is you don't want to be wasting 2 or 3 seconds to make sure you get a double shot when you have an upshot ready to go right now. Because another thing that is an unnoticed time loss is you have your charge beam going and you're just waiting for it to release it.
Yeah, I should probably mention it's actually on plasma beam that causes you, whenever they got the plasma beam upgrade, is actually whenever the beam starts doing damage per frame in an enemy. Wave beam, the only thing wave beam does, I believe, is it does increase your damage, but it's mostly allows you, the big thing is it allows you to shoot through walls. So
Wave beam doesn't increase your damage at all.
okay, I thought it did. I might be thinking, almost in pretty much all the games, like getting a beam upgrade increase your damage. So I wasn't sure if wave beam increased damage or not.
So
wave
go ahead.
Pretty much, the only thing wave beam lets you do is get into the restricted area. And then other than that, we're not going to see any use for it for the rest of this run. Go ahead, Ross, with whatever you were getting ready to say.
I was about to say, at this point in the race, Fozzy would have to screw up terribly in order for No Life to catch up and win. Either that or No Life must have should try to get the fight of his life against Sax, because it looks like Fozzy does have a sizable lead, and he could go one of two ways. Fozzy can screw up really bad at Sax or die in order for No Life to catch up and win.
Or soft lock.
Or soft lock.
Yeah, the two factors I think to worry about at the moment are, for one, if either of them knows the stun quick kill on both of the next two boss fights, and also how many doubles they can get on the Ice Beam Core X. That's extremely difficult to do, but if one of them can get quite a few of them, it'll save a lot of time.
So looking at their splits, Fozzy split screw attack at 115.28, while No Life split at 115.53. So that's almost a 30-second gap between the two runners.
Yep, and then I'm not sure what Fozzy does if Sax breaks out of the initial freeze. I'm not sure if he tries to reset the freeze or if he tries to fight it the intended way.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say 30 seconds would be hard to lose at this fight.
Definitely.
At the next two fights, they can very easily go awry.
And yeah, and if Omega breaks out of Sunlock, that's a huge loss as well. And it's not terribly hard to mess up Omega Stunlock either. I mean, we've seen a bunch of different top runners mess it up before, so it won't be. It wouldn't be anywhere near out of the question for it to happen. Oh yeah, Alfonso. I guess another thing that we didn't mention about Plasma Beam is there's some enemies that can just block it, like Nightmare. So you actually do a lot less damage with Plasma Beam on Nightmare's face, since you only do 1 frame of damage. So when you actually acquire a plasma beam, your base damage actually goes down, and then where the damage really stacks up is when you're able to get multiple frames of hit damage on it.
Yeah, I think Xbox also blocks it if I remember correctly.
Dragon Fangs, it says it does not. At least not the hitbox, it's hittable area.
Okay, I always heard that it did. So in that case, it's just like the time charging it is just too slow to make up for missile damage.
Oh yeah. I mean, you might be able to get something that's kind of frame perfect, or frame and pixel perfect, in order to actually have a shot go all the way through. Because it's actually his legs that block it. But it's possible. I suppose it's possible to actually have stuff that goes through them.
Okay, so I guess we should explain the sax fight. JC, you can start off.
So, basically, we have the ultimate battle starting up. How the developers want to justify them is for the plasma beam, wide beam, to do only 1 frame of damage. So it knocks her into an unavoidable state. She jumps around, does screw attack, and does stuff like that. But they didn't take away our ability to freeze her with the ice missiles, diffusion missiles. So if we have Sax frozen, then our plasma beam, wave beam will do multiple frames of damage. So it's possible to 4-shot her. And then NOUFozzy looks like he's a little bit more comfortable with just trying to fight.
Oh no!
Come on, a little bit more comfortable fighting her that way. But you can actually refreeze her from a different spot, just like you just saw No Life do.
Yeah, Fozzy. Unfortunately, he died. The strat he was doing in the fight is actually fairly consistent, but Fozzy wasn't really moving around Sax properly. You can, if you move like a certain way every time, you can basically guarantee whenever you do that strat what Sax is going to do. But Fozzy basically just kept trying to jump over Sax and shoot a beam, and that generally works. But if you move a certain way, you can actually guarantee that Sax won't do any strange behavior, which is usually the strat that I do if I mess up the stun lock kill. And that's really unfortunate, and it looks like that No Life is going to take this race. Really unfortunate what happened to Fozzy.
I wasn't paying attention when Fozzy safety saved or not.
He did not. And even if he did, I think that wouldn't have... I think he still would have lost, because at this point we have to rely on No Life messing up Omega.
Yeah, I mean, No Life can still die. We've seen top runners die to Omega before.
Even in this tournament. As we saw, the best player in the world in this game currently actually lost his first match because he died to Omega. So it's very possible that can happen. And right there at the end, we see that No Life got a trick called Low Height, which is, we've already talked about Low Height before. You get one right at the end here, and it speeds up that area by a little bit, but not by too much.
Nice foot, Low Height.
So, Ross, explain Omega really quick before he dies.
The Omega fight should be very easy if you know what you're doing. When you get the Ice Beam upgrade, as you're about to see here, it really takes positioning on... you basically want to put Omega in a certain position, and Samus as well in a certain position where you can spam ice beams and keep Omega in a stun lock. The way that works is that Omega reacts to the damage that he receives by stepping back. Putting him in a certain position causes you to do enough damage to him, which basically forces him to step back continuously. Not having to deal with any of his swipes like No Life is having to deal with right now.
Sorry, we got a little anxiety there because I thought I was afraid No Life was about to die, but thankfully he did the fight pretty cleanly. He did mess up the quick kill setup, but he was still able to finish the fight pretty well.
Yeah, so generally, if you mess up the quick kill, it's generally best and safe to just switch you going casually rather than try to get a new stun lock going. Unless you can get the stun lock before Omega starts stepping forward. How's it going, Fozzy?
Pretty well. A little salty, to be honest.
You had it, man. Like, I'm not even kidding. If you did not die,
Yeah, well, whenever I'd like finish up a section or like during cutscene or something, I'd like check the stream real quick to see like where we were, and like, dude, we were close the entire time.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
really close.
Yeah, I think if you would have finished off Sax with the switching to the casual strat after you lost the stun lock or the freeze lock rather, I think it would have been a race within 5-10 seconds.
Yeah, I kind of got nervous for some reason. I don't know exactly what happened. Just like, I don't know.
Hey, what's up?
Yo,
NOUFozzy, did you?
I died.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you die at SIX, I guess.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I messed up the fast strat because I haven't like done it in too long. I didn't practice much for this.
Oh. And how was your run? Was it good? Was it
It was decent. I wasn't too far behind from my splits, so
okay?
the thing I expected you to win anyway, because
Yeah.
I know we're like pretty much the same level of skill, but I know you're a little better than me.
Well, my run was really bad, so I was sure I was going to lose, but then when you did that quit, I was like, wow. But I run.
Yep.
Yeah. When you know, like when you do the emergency, you skip the navigation room in sector 3.
Yeah. You went to it.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes.
Oh my god, I was really mad.
so to go ahead and ask, I guess, just ask you guys a few questions before we go. No Life.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that race?
To be honest, I'm really surprised I won. I had a lot of bad mistakes. Like I just said, I went into navigation room in the emergency, and I failed I failed a bunch of other stuff. So I'm really surprised, you know. But SIX can be really cruel sometimes, and dying to it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about Sector 5 before emergency. When did you realize that you were kind of getting pretty bad on your missile count?
Yeah. I use too much missiles, and I always takes the missile, you know, after ice missile, the one with the bomb. I always take this missile, but you know, I just start, you know, I thought that I will not have enough missile to go through, but finally it went well.
Okay, so I do have a suggestion for you. It's like if you find yourself in that situation, you need to grab an extra missile pack. So when you get, I would skip that one that you grabbed, and then so you know that long shaft that you fall down in emergency at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
If you instead of going left to get to the little lava room, you go right. There's a pretty fast missile pack that way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, you go right, and then you go up on top of that little platform that's up there in that room, and then there's a missile pack in the floor there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's a lot faster than waiting for that bomb.
There's also one in sector 6, I think, at the beginning. I see a lot of people that takes this missile pack. I don't know if it's
Sector
fast.
6 one is actually one of the ones you should grab.
Yeah,
if you're doing 40 missiles.
But
you have to do land a spring ball jump out of it. Otherwise, you lose time over different missiles.
I see. Yeah, I take a lot of missiles and E-tank for safety, but you know, if I actually practice the game with less missiles or E-tank, I think I could do it. But I'm just too lazy to actually practice.
Yeah, it's like you got to be you have to be very comfortable with the game, with the run before you
Yeah.
start dropping those E tanks. I mean,
Mhm.
because there's a few times where I think your health was getting pretty bad.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think Nightmare was really scary. I almost died, but I got out of it. Also, in the in the alley with all the spitters, I went back to get my speed, but I got hit more, so I was afraid of dying, but
yeah,
it didn't happen.
generally in that little spitter room, if the spitters aren't cooperating, you're not in. It's about if you make it past about halfway to 60% of the way through the room, and you still got hit by another spitter. It's generally faster just to keep going and then just grab that missile pack there,
Yeah, yeah.
and then having another missile pack makes things a little bit more consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, overall, my run. I mean, the first part wasn't too bad, but after the emergency, I start, not playing too well, and I made some mistakes. So yeah.
Yep. So, what kind of things are you going to be focusing on for your next race? Looks like it's going to be the winner of Mandatobi versus Zonorous.
Okay. Yeah, I think I mean, getting more consistent overall. I mean, especially when you get out of Sector 6 after Vagasut, I lost a bunch of time here because my RNG wasn't really good and I wasn't able to adapt. So I think that's something I need to practice. Reacting to RNG and being able to not lose too much time because the RNG is not in my favor. That's something.
Yeah. Actually, probably the biggest advice I can give you for your run is as soon as you have Charge Beam, pretty much every second afterwards, you want to be holding B the entire time.
Yeah.
There's a few things I saw in involving Blue X blocking your shots.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So if you have your charge beam going, you can just pseudo screw through it. It's not going to make you lose your pseudo screw, and then you're not going to be taking those damage from the random enemies in the that the Blue X shielded.
That's something nice to learn.
Yeah. So.
All right. So, Fozzy, so you've been eliminated from the tournament. What can you tell us about your experiences for the tournament? About whether it's playing games or the opponents that you played against, your overall experience.
What a question. I'd say, well, for Fusion in particular, I guess if I want to be good or be considered good, I'll definitely have to practice a lot more. I'm not very consistent, and I know I can be. I guess I could see my potential more by actually competing against others rather than like doing runs for myself and just getting frustrated over my red splits all the time and everything. So it's always a lot more fun to do that, and it just makes you want to do more runs.
Yeah, exactly.
Participating in those things.
Do you plan to keep Fusion going for a while?
Yeah. Right now I'm focusing on a different game, but I'm definitely keeping Fusion on the side. Always, sometimes go back to it. Whenever I play that one other game, I've been playing Donkey Kong 64. Whenever I stream it, when I'm done, sometimes I'll do like maybe one Fusion run to like end the stream and everything. Like I'm gonna keep at it. Yeah.
So again, congratulations to No Life for winning the race, and
Thank you.
Fozzy, you did put up a great fight. I think you're pretty happy with that performance.
Yeah, I was mad. I'm not too mad. Just a little salty at SAX.
You had an incredible run up to that point, so I mean, you just keep working on that. You will easily be able to get to a sub 50, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, then I would say to go ahead and start studying like some of the sub 50 runs. And then there's a lot of unnoticed time wasters within a lot of runs that you really
Mhm.
don't notice until it's pointed out.
Yeah.
Focus on like when you want to wall jump, when not to wall jump. There's a few places I think I saw that. I mean, and then it only wastes like a handful of frames, but every frame counts in this game
Hmm.
because
Frames make seconds, and seconds make.
yeah, and
that.
then the RNG infusion is frame based, so even saving one frame might give you a more favorable RNG. It could also give you a worse RNG, but just kind of focus on keeping things tighter. I'm not sure what kind of practice style do you have. Do you normally practice like sectors at a time, room at a time?
Usually I practice sectors at a time, but I haven't done a lot of that. I did that recently because I had a marathon run at DreamHack Montreal recently.
That's nice.
So I did practice for that, but then yeah, that's usually how I practice though. Fun fact, that run at DreamHack I had was also a race against No Life.
Yeah, that was a fun race. Not a
I
really
actually
good.
expected us to be that close today because whenever we do race, we're always like close like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. And when you died, I was at Omega, so we were really close. I think. I don't know. I mean, people
He,
who watched the race might be able to
yeah,
tell us.
yeah. Fozzy was about 30 seconds ahead of you going into the Sax fight.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
and he died. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he just
Okay.
waited a while before he officially forfeited from the
Oh,
race.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, so that okay.
I was actually ahead.
Yeah, okay. That's nice to know.
I don't know how I pulled ahead of you, but I did.
Well, it might be. I mean, someone can tell us maybe, but
Yeah,
maybe
it's like
emergency.
so. How No Life had quite a bit of lead up until animals. Um, then running low on missiles, grabbing a few extra packs.
Yeah.
Well, closed the gap a little bit, and then you had fairly bad RNG coming in from the animals.
Yeah. I got 0 I beam on Yakuza, but fourth round. Then Netori was decent, I guess. I don't remember, but Nightmare was the worst. I got like 4 beam or 3 beam, and I couldn't manipulate him correctly, so I lost a bunch of time in the fight. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you had quite a bit of lead up until animals.
Yeah.
That's when the lead change happened, and it stayed
Okay.
pretty consistent for most of the run after that.
Oh, that
Mhm.
might be. I think I had like really good animals. Like my animals just
Yeah.
literally came out instantly.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you had like 1 second off from like ideal animals, and then you guys were pretty much synced because of that.
Nice. Yeah.
Sick.
Since I did the mistake of emergency, I start doing some mistakes, and RNG was not too good, so I know it doesn't help, I guess.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah, fun race.
Okay, guys, I think that's everything we've got. Thanks to nolife9face and NOUFozzy for the race. It was a really fun race to watch.
Thanks.
Thank
Just
you.
seeing the lead changes all over the place and just the huge potential on how close the race could have been.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are always exciting. Um, as of right now, we have nothing else going on. The next thing that's going to be on Speed Gaming is we're going to have a Metroid Fusion match at 11 a.m. And then that is between Kirby Master and Slag. And then coming up after that at get back to the calendar. At I guess 12 hours after that looks like it's the first match for the Super Metroid double anti bingo match tournament. So that should be fun. So Thanks again to the runners for the race. Thanks to Next Gen and Rossi for commentary. Thanks to all you guys for coming out to watch this and
Yeah.
here with us a bit.
Thanks,
And-
Thank you for having us, and thanks for the restream, dude. You guys, I gotta mention, you guys do a great job at that.
Yeah.
and
really
then
great
most
job.
of all, thanks to Fiesel for instantly accepting it when I brought up the idea of hosting a tournament on Speed Gaming and working so great with us as far as getting everything coordinated, scheduled, getting all the technical stuff done for us. That's all I've got. Fiesel, do you have anything? Well, alright guys, thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks.